Hi there, this is Transfer Talk. Atletico Madrid's Joao Felix could prove pivotal if Conor Gallagher is to leave Chelsea after a deal to sign Samu Omorodion collapses. Manchester United making moves in the window too. Matthijs de Ligt and Ligt Mazraoui are having their medicals right now. Emerson Royal is in Italy ahead of a move from Tottenham to AC Milan ahead of a £12.8 million deal. And Kurt Zouma's move to Shabab Al-Ahli could be in doubt. The full story later this hour. Good afternoon to you all. Good afternoon once again to James, to Flex and to Dan. And adding a bit of sanity and class, European football expert Kevin Hatchard.
What's wrong with our sanity?
You guys are great, but you've just been arguing for the last hour and he's brought a bit of calm, which has been very, very welcome. Kev, we'll get your thoughts on what's going on at Chelsea in a moment. But just set the scene for us, James. What exactly has happened here with this Omorodion deal and how does it affect Gallagher?
Yeah, so a bit of background on this. Last week, Chelsea agreed a deal worth $34.5 million to sign Omorodion from Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid then agreed a similar move for Conor Gallagher to go the other way. Gallagher completed his medical. He's currently in Madrid waiting for this deal to be finalised. However, the Omorodion deal is currently off. Can't be ruled out, but very unlikely at this stage that this happens as things stand. Those two deals are linked because they're effectively a swap deal, whereby each side are able to pocket £35 million around that from an accounting perspective, whilst they can spread that £35 million fee they've spent across a 5-year period. So that helps them from a PSR perspective. But as with a swap deal, if one of the deals collapses, then that puts the other one in real jeopardy. And that's what's happening here. So Chelsea want to sell Gallagher to Atletico Madrid because they don't want to sell to a Premier League rival. And they want to ensure they get that £34.5 million in pure profit to help them from a PSR perspective and to avoid him going to a Premier League rival or going for free next summer. In January, he'd be in a position where he could sign a contract with a club like Atletico Madrid to join them as a free agent next summer. And that's why Chelsea are now working on a deal to potentially sign Joao Felix from Atletico Madrid. He's been out of the picture there for the last 18 months, had that 6-month loan spell at Chelsea a couple of seasons ago and spent last season at Barcelona. So this could be, Joao Felix could be the player that makes this transfer puzzle fit. He could be the final piece in this jigsaw. At the same time, this jeopardy doesn't have any bearing at all in regards to Julian Alvarez and his move to Atletico Madrid. That deal, £82 million it's worth. Man City, they expect the deal to go through and Alvarez is thought to have arrived in Madrid for his medical. So that deal doesn't seem to be linked to the other two, but Omorodion and Gallagher, those are very much linked, and that is why the deal for Conor Gallagher to join Atletico Madrid, despite him completing a medical, agreeing personal terms, is still not yet finalised.
He's already been at the stadium, hasn't he? Wandering around the Wanda Metropolitano. So, Kevin, how badly do Atletico want Conor Gallagher? And do you think there's going to be a real will from both clubs to find a way through this?
Yeah, I think they will. I think he's a perfect player for Diego Simeone. They want different options in that midfield area. There's talk they might shift to a different formation as well that would require having quite a lot of depth in that central midfield area. And he's somebody with his work rate, with his attitude, with his energy that would really work well for Diego Simeone. There's something quite special happening, I think, at Atletico this season. It's always been a case in the last few years that maybe some of their work in the transfer market was a bit underwhelming. They wouldn't quite back Diego Simeone as much as he would want. That does seem to have changed. The Alvarez move shows that. Already brought in Alexander Sørloth from Villarreal. That's a really interesting deal. Robin Lenormand, who's been one of the best centre-backs in La Liga, he's in the building already as well. So Gallagher could be part of something quite special.
But Flex, if you're Conor Gallagher right now, where's your head at? Because, you know, as I mentioned there, he's already been to the stadium. He's almost there. I mean, have you mentally checked out of being a Chelsea player?
Yeah, you would have thought so, especially with the perceived treatment that Conor Gallagher's had to go through. I think a lot of Chelsea fans weren't happy to see that he had to be sold. That seems to be the model at Chelsea now, selling their academy graduates to raise money through PSR. But when you've been pretty much unveiled by Atleti, it's going to be very worrying for him to obviously have been in pictures. He knows it's pretty much done. And then to get this part of the deal to catch a snag and be like, I don't want to be going backwards. You know, he's he's found himself in a position where he's got a new beginning, a new start, a chance to really focus on his football now in a whole new life, in a different country. So it won't be great for him to be sort of left in this limbo, but Chelsea in limbo as usual as well with their deals. So not a great situation for him to be in, and he should be hoping that this can get done as quickly as possible and he can get the move that he's set off to get.
Seems like he's relying on Joao Felix. I'm going to get your thoughts on that in a moment. But first of all, with Omar I mean, quite a few of us thought it was a bit of a left field selection when we heard that he was signing for Chelsea. What were your thoughts when the news was announced that he was going there?
It kind of fits in with what they've been doing. If you think of somebody like Nicholas Jackson, for example, when he came in from La Liga, not a huge track record, not a long track record of proven success, but did quite well, I thought, in his first season in the Premier League. With Samu, what you've got is a situation where, so he was at Granada, he scored goals for their B team, he got promoted to the first team. On his debut, he scored against Atletico Madrid. That was still in the transfer window. And Atleti said, "Oh, he's good. We'll take him." So they spent
just a lot, doesn't it? You score against a side.
So spent just a few million on him, sent him straight away to Alvarez. So he never played for Atleti. Went straight to Alvarez, scored goals for them. But it's quite a big markup price-wise. You can see the potential. Absolutely, he's quick, he's strong, he's got an eye for goal, he's got everything that we'd want in a young forward. But there is that risk factor, and I think from Atletico's point of view, didn't spend much on him. Could get a lot of money back in to fund the other business that they're doing. That's a deal they would have quite happily, I think, signed off on.
Right, Dan, let's talk about Joao Felix then. I mean, it was a fairly underwhelming first stint at Chelsea. Do you think the fans are going to get excited about a return for Felix?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin mentioned kind of potential, and compared to Samu Omar, compared to Joao Felix, maybe it is a good solution for Chelsea because he's a bit older than Meridian as well. Do Chelsea need more potential? I'm not quite sure. I watched them play Inter Milan yesterday, and actually everyone talks about how this side are adapting to Enzo Maresca's tactics. I think Chelsea are actually making a lot of progress. Defensively, they seemed a lot better. Going forward, what I saw was a lot of chances being created from the likes of Enzo Fernandez putting balls in behind, Noli Madueke, Michaela Mudryk putting balls in the middle. But what they lacked was that finisher in the middle. And actually, when you look at Joao Felix's kind of finishes in his first stint in the Premier League, he did only score 4 goals. But actually, a lot of those finishes were in and around the box, making runs in behind defences. And although maybe there's a misconception of Joao Felix, maybe that he's not that type of player, but actually you'll be able to say more about, is he a 9 or is he more of a deep playing 9?
I think he can be both. I think he's a super footballer. I think he's really, if you look at the guy that came through in the first place at Benfica, super exciting. But the problem was he went to the wrong club. They spent an enormous amount of money on him. That's not his fault. He did okay for, I think people look at it and think it was a total disaster, the Atleti move. It wasn't. He contributed to them winning the league. He has played well for them at times. But him and Diego Simeone have very different ideas and it hasn't really gelled. So I do think there's a bit of a fixer-upper there. I think he needs to play. I think he needs to be at a club that has a bit of stability. Maybe Chelsea's not that, but we'll see. And I think there's definitely a player there that can perform at a very high level. I mean, look what he did in the early months at Barcelona. Played really, really well when he had a point to prove. Yes, it kind of faded a little bit, but I still think there's huge potential there.
Well, you mentioned potential. Let's have a better look. I'm going to go on a little adventure to the magic wall, as you can see here. And really, we've been talking about Joao Felix, his first stint at Chelsea. And we know that it maybe was slightly underwhelming, maybe. I mean, he did join in the January transfer window in 2023. And these are his stats, really. 16 games. He did maybe not have the best debut because he got sent off against Fulham. He did miss the next few games. And then he got 4 goals. And as I mentioned, a few goals against the likes of Bournemouth, Burnley, Everton. And actually, again, when you look at what Chelsea maybe need at the moment, it is that player who gets in behind defences, who can play between the lines of the box. And maybe, I'm not sure if Samu Omar would be that player just yet, because as we've been talking about, you're looking at much more potential. But is that Joao Felix? Well, we'll wait and see. But maybe, perhaps, there's also a sign of wanting to maybe make things right after that first stint, because it was slightly underwhelming. What do you think, Flex? Because he did score a pretty good goal at the end of that stint at Chelsea.
Oh, that didn't mean anything against Manchester United, that goal. I know the one to talk about. No, but I agree with Kev in terms of, I feel like he just needs to find a home. I think the clash of styles and the situations he's found himself in at clubs haven't quite been as stable as he would like. And the match between his playing style and where he's been at maybe hasn't been right. Chelsea fans in this, it's a bit confusing for them as well, because this is a player that they potentially had the chance to sign after not a great loan spell. And obviously the club decided not to do that. But Chelsea's changed so much again since then, and it's an ever-changing situation. And if you're a Chelsea fan, you're sort of thinking, do I be optimistic about this? Because at one point, this was a really up-and-coming player with bags of talent, which the talent still seems to be in there, but we need to get it out of him. Or should I be off-putting by this? This wasn't the plan. We were supposed to get Amorodi, and that hasn't worked. Now they're just trying to give us Felix because they don't want him. What are we doing at Chelsea Football Club? So it's difficult for the fans to really get behind it or kind of distance themselves from it.
It was so disappointing. I mean, when you look at the stats in terms of it was a really expensive deal that Chelsea did at the time, £9 million fee plus all his wages. I mean, somebody's worked it out. It costs £4 million per goal, £750,000 per appearance, £12,000 per minute. We know how brilliant he is as a player on his day, but it doesn't feel like what Chelsea need right now when you consider the progress that some of the young players did make last season. We saw what Cole Palmer did. Christopher Nkunku will be like a new signing for Chelsea this season because of what happened in the last season. And yes, these players don't play in exactly the same position, but you're in an area of the pitch where it's getting very congested now. Mudryk, Sterling, Madueke has been really impressive when he's got the opportunity. What does that mean for his development if they bring in a player like this? Dewsbury Hall play potentially as a 10. Where's he going to fit in? So I think like Chelsea are trying to sort out this deal with Atletico Madrid, and maybe they're not signing the right type of player they need right now to try and get them to the next stage. I think they need to keep faith with the players that did show promising signs last season under Mauricio Pochettino, including Nicholas Jackson. It feels like already, despite the fact he made really impressive strides last season against all the odds, 17 goals he scored in all competitions, it already feels like Chelsea are ready to move on with him now.
So the Gallagher situation could be affected. We're hearing that the Julian Alvarez deal shouldn't be affected by the Omarodian situation. That should still go through. Why is he moving to Atletico? Is it all about being the main man?
Yeah, I think it is. I think he wants to be a nailed-on starter somewhere, and I think Atleti would give him that opportunity. Yes, they've brought Sørloth in, but you wouldn't spend that amount of money on Alvarez if you weren't going to give him regular first-team starts. I think this links with his international future as well, because he knows Lautaro Martinez has been playing really well for Inter and also for Argentina. So there's a bit of competition for places there. The other thing as well, crazy as it seems, he's achieved so much at Manchester City already as a guy who wasn't always the main man. So you've done that bit, you've won a treble with them, you've won a World Cup as well. Now it's maybe time to be a bit selfish, to have a bit of the limelight himself. But, I mean, this is a guy who can deal with it. He was scoring hat-tricks for River Plate, one of the biggest clubs in South America, when he was really young. So he's absolutely got the chops to carry this kind of move off.
All right, let's just finish this chat. I know it's gone to Man City there a little bit, but it's all interlinked, as we explained. But going back to Chelsea, Pedro Neto, that is done. He's through the door. He's introduced at half-time on Sunday in their friendly game. We mentioned there, though, James mentioned all of the players that they've got in these forward positions. Does his arrival increase the necessity to move on a player or two, particularly a winger?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it sounds like an exaggeration, but I felt like yesterday, that game at Stamford Bridge against Inter Milan, it was almost like an audition for those wingers who did play, with Neto being in the stands, being presented at half-time. We saw Noni Madueke, Michael Mudryk start that game, but Chelsea now have 5 wingers now that Neto's there. You have Mudryk, Madueke, as I mentioned, Raheem Sterling got 15 minutes or so off the bench, and then you have Cole Palmer, who made a return from the Euros yesterday as well, to a fantastic ovation from the Blues crowd. So you would think it's unsustainable to have 5 wingers remain there before deadline day. I think just based off yesterday, I think maybe the player who, we know Raheem Sterling's attracting interest from Serie A, Juventus especially. I also think Michael Mudryk perhaps needs to do a bit more maybe under Enzo Maresca. I could see Maresca talking to him, coaching him quite a lot on the touchline. So maybe there's more development there.
OK, just a fresh transfer line reaching us from the Championship, and that is that Jessurun Raksaki is understood to be heading to Sheffield United from Crystal Palace for a medical ahead of a season-long loan. So that sounds like that one is going ahead. Next, though, our focus moves to Manchester United. They are close to signing 2 new defenders. Welcome back. It's been a very busy day, busy few days, and more transfer news just reaching us because Aston Villa have held initial talks with Feyenoord over a potential signing of Lutscherel Geertruida. Have I got that right?
Very good.
Geertruida. He is Dutch. Kevin, briefly tell us about him.
Yeah, he's a player that has been a big part of what Feyenoord did under Arne Slot in winning the Eredivisie, but also then winning the Cup. He's played in the Champions League, he's played Europa League as well. He's somebody who can play centre-back, can play full-back as well. He was very strongly linked with a move to RB Leipzig at one stage, actually. He's been linked with Villa off and on all through the summer. And I think that's a really smart signing. I think he's somebody that has really improved under Slot. And I think he's ready to make that next leap.
OK, so interesting news for Aston Villa fans. Interesting day for Man United so far. Let's get straight there because Matthijs de Ligt and Ligt Mazraoui are at the training ground, as is Vinny O'Connor. And it seems like these two deals are getting closer, Vinny.
That's right, yeah, 2 medicals underway. We've had the usual palaver of waiting to see whether or not it's the 2 players themselves in the blacked-out windowed people carriers that have turned up here at Manchester United's training ground. They went in a good few hours ago now, and one of the people carriers subsequently came out. We're not 100% sure whether the medical is taking place on-site, because certainly United have the medical facilities, or whether part of it is taking place off-site at the moment. But both those players undergoing medicals today ahead of a move to Manchester United. We can talk about those deals as well that Manchester United have struck with Bayern Munich. For Matthijs de Ligt, it will be a deal worth up to £42.9 million. That'll be £38.6 million plus £4.3 million in add-ons. We know about his relationship, of course, with Erik ten Hag. He was his captain at Ajax. They won the Dutch League title, of course, and got to the semi-finals of the Champions League as well. He subsequently spent 2 seasons at Bayern Munich after signing from Juventus as well, playing 73 times for Munich and scoring 5 goals in that time. Has obviously lost his place in the side of late, but still only 24 years of age. So if he can recapture his best form, then obviously it's a decent deal for Manchester United. And add to that, as you mentioned, Mazraoui, another reinforcement for that back line, much needed for Manchester United, given the injury problems that they've had there, of course. He's also having his medical today, as I say. Particularly important deal as well, with Wan-Bissaka seemingly moving to West Ham United now. Obviously, West Ham had a deal for Mazraoui sorted, it seemed, earlier in this summer transfer window, but turned their attention to Wan-Bissaka with that deal falling through. And now, ironically, obviously, Mazraoui's move to Manchester United seems dependent on Wan-Bissaka moving to West Ham United. At the moment, that all appears to be moving forward as well. Registration for both de Ligt and Mazraoui needs to be completed by midday on Thursday for them to be available for the season opener. As I say, we're not anticipating any problems as regards personal terms with either player, so there's every chance they could at least have some involvement in that season opener against Fulham on Friday night.
Vinny, how pleased personally will Erik ten Hag be to get these deals over the line? Obviously now he's working in a wider structure with Ineos, but in terms of de Ligt especially, he's a player that he knows really well.
Yeah, I think so. I think one thing that immediately springs to mind is it always helps a manager when you've got players in the dressing room who are loyal to you, and certainly de Ligt falls into that category, as does Mazraoui as well. But we'll start with de Ligt and just looking at what he'll bring to Manchester United. Obviously, it'll be a second centre-back signing this summer after the arrival of Len Yoro, but we know that Yoro is out for, another 3 months or so after picking up that foot injury against Arsenal. Albeit he is one for the future, but at the same time, we know the issues that United have had, particularly at centre-half and across that back line through last season as well. Now, Ten Hag rates de Ligt or certainly rated him as one of the best central defenders in Europe. He said back in 2019 that he had no doubt he will soon be number 1 in that position as well. De Ligt himself was 19 at that point. I mentioned earlier that he was Ten Hag's captain as well, captain of the side that reached the Champions League semi-finals. He was 17, of course, when he was the youngest player to play in a Europa League final as well, and left Ajax still as a teenager, having played 100 times for them. That shows the experience that he's got at a relatively young age as well. I also mentioned that he's looking to recover his best levels after a dip in form during his time at Bayern Munich. Wants to obviously rediscover his best at club level, but also to get back into the international starting lineup as well. And Ten Hag was quoted as saying a couple of years that he wanted to sign him a couple of years ago. At that time, his move to Bayern was pretty much done. It seems that maybe fate has brought them back together at crucial times in both of their careers. As for Mazraoui, again another former Ajax defender, United's need for a fullback may be highlighted in that Community Shield as well, when you had Pellistri playing as a makeshift right back during that second period. Mazraoui himself can actually play right back and left back as well. He enjoyed working with Ten Hag first time around, credits him with helping him on a tactical level and his attacking development as well. He described him as a top coach who's been very important to him as well. I think there's also a feeling that maybe Erik Ten Hag is hoping Mazraoui can rekindle that relationship he had with Antony and bring the best out of Antony. They had a decent working relationship, a decent partnership down that right-hand side during their time at Ajax as well. So the reasoning, it seems, behind both deals is sound, and Erik Ten Hag will just be hoping now that all bodes well for what kind of form they can show here at Manchester United when those deals are complete.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Vinny. Right, let's get straight into this then. Kevin, De Ligt, I mean, as Vinny pointed out there, he was the next big thing, wasn't he? As a young centre-back, played in the Europa League final at 17 years old, high praise. There is this perception that his career is not stagnated, but it's maybe not quite continued on that trajectory, even though he's played for some big clubs. Do you think he is a good signing for Manchester United?
Yeah, I do. I think context is really important here, because you're absolutely right. As a teenager, burst onto the scene at Ajax, held that back line together at times. Ajax took a lot of risks then. Brilliant team that got to the semi-finals of the Champions League in 2019, was so close to reaching that final. Then he goes to Juventus. Juventus at that stage, starting that decline from where they were, the dominant force in Italy. There are some big beasts in that dressing room when he arrives, guys like Chiellini, guys like Bonucci. Wouldn't take too kindly to a guy coming in as the next big thing in their position. He's admitted himself he found it really difficult to establish himself as a leader, and that's always what he wants to do. He wants to be a big voice in the dressing room. He always fronts up in interviews. He's always very candid about whether he's performed poorly or whether a team's performed poorly. So he goes to Juventus, but he did play a lot. People make out that he was on the bench a lot, but actually he did play a lot of games for Juventus. Then he goes to Bayern. It's a similar scenario in the sense that his time there coincided with their most difficult period in recent memory, because they only just won the league first season and then didn't win the league last season. He had some injury problems as well that set him back a bit. But I still believe this is a guy who's just literally turned 25, lots of experience, played in a lot of big games, is working with a coach who knows him. And I think if he stays fit, has all the tools to be a leading player for United in the years to come. I think Mazraoui is a really interesting one as well, because here's a guy who's versatile, can cover left back, cover right back. Thomas Tuchel played him in almost every big Champions League game last season. But the big question mark over him is injuries. He's had injuries, he's had some illness problems as well, and so he hasn't been starting as many games as you would like to see from a player of that calibre. So that's going to be a big question. The other thing, and I've always felt this about him, even when he was at Ajax, going forward, very, very good. And I think that point about Antony is a really interesting one. Defensively, can be caught out a bit, so that will need to improve as well.
James, how about these two signings? Because, you know, we're hearing Ineos, they're coming in, they've got their own ideas, we've got a new CEO, new director of football. But do these two signings show that Ten Hag still does have an influence on who comes in?
Yeah, well, Ten Hag heading into his third season now in charge at Manchester United, but his fingerprints have been all over United's transfer activity over the previous few windows. And that looks to be the same here, because with Mazraoui and De Ligt on their way in, that would make it 11 players United would have signed who were either born in the Netherlands or played there. He's overseen the signings of Dutch internationals Joshua Zirkzee and Tyrell Malacia. Wout Weghorst was on loan at the club last year. Antony, Lisandro Martinez and Andre Nana all played under Ten Hag at Ajax, as did De Ligt and Mazraoui. Christian Eriksen previously played at Ajax, though never played under Ten Hag. United, they're yet to decide whether or not to bring Sofian Amrabat back to the club permanently, but he worked under Ten Hag at Utrecht, and Mason Mount was on loan at Vitesse in 2017. So despite Manchester United rebooting their sporting structure this summer, like Dan Ashworth, Christopher Vell, Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox coming in, it's clear Ten Hag still has a strong voice when it comes to recruitment, and that's surely a sign they really do see him as the long-term manager of Manchester United.
All right, yeah, interesting. Right, before we get to the break, we're just hearing that Ipswich are among the clubs interested in Calvin Phillips from Manchester City. As soon as we get some more on that, we will let you know. We told you last week that several clubs in the Premier League were keen on him. More, as I said, as we get it. Next, though, we're in Newcastle, and you want to stay with us because we've got some pretty big developments on the way. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. Time to get to Newcastle. They want to bring in a centre-back.
Yeah, afternoon, guys. Welcome to Newcastle and the River Tyne, the Tyne Bridge, which you can probably see just over my shoulder. And that is the place that Newcastle will hope that they can bring Mark Guehi in the next couple of days. We can break the news now that Newcastle have returned to Crystal Palace with a third offer for the England international defender. You'll remember we said last week that Newcastle had made a second bid for him in the region of £50 million. But it's my understanding that over the course of the weekend, Newcastle have gone back to the Eagles with a revised bid, an improved bid, I believe closer to the £65 million that Crystal Palace are asking for. And as I understand it, discussions, negotiations are underway. That has not been knocked back yet by Crystal Palace, so we will await the outcome for that one. So Eddie Howe desperate to bring in Mark Guehi, clearly, because they've returned with that third bid, and we'll wait to see what Crystal Palace come back with.
Yeah, you say desperate to bring him in. Why are they so keen on Guehi in particular?
Well, look, he's an England international, isn't he? I think everyone saw over the summer just what he can bring to a side. Was part of that England defence that went all the way to the finals of the final of the Euros, should I say. And look, I think he's been pretty impressive for a long time now at Crystal Palace, particularly in the second half of last season when Palace rose up the Premier League table under their new manager, Oliver Glasner. And, of course, it would be another player who knows the Premier League, who's an international player, and I think crucially as well, knows some of the Newcastle players within that squad. He's quite close with Anthony Gordon, who, of course, was away in the summer with England as well. They came through the youth ranks together for the national team. And also Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall, who he was alongside at Chelsea. And without doubt, he's a class player, isn't he? I mean, £65 million is the price on his head from Crystal Palace. Any central defender with that price tag on his head, you would suggest they're a very, very good player. Newcastle looking to add numbers in defence. They're a little bit short, particularly in the right-hand side of defence. They only really have Fabian Schär in that position. But crucially, Guehi can play right centre-back and left centre-back as well. So he would give them that option on either side. And as Eddie Howe said on Friday, I spoke to him after that match, their friendly match against Girona that they won 4-0 on Friday night. He said, look, it's really difficult to try and improve this Newcastle United team, particularly the starting 11. He said there's only a small pool of players that can come in and do that. Clearly, they've identified Guehi as one of that small pool of players. They've made a first bid, a second bid. Both have been rejected by Crystal Palace. That third offer has been placed over the weekend. Crystal Palace are mulling over that. And as I said a moment ago, negotiations between the two clubs are underway. Newcastle will hope to reach a compromise with their Premier League counterparts and hope that they have Guehi in this week in time for the Premier League kick-off on Saturday, where they host Southampton at St James's Park with a 3 o'clock kick-off on Saturday. Will Mark Guehi be there? We'll wait and see.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Keith. Great to get some breaking news during the show. Dan, Mark Guehi, is he someone that is going to improve Newcastle?
Yeah, I mean, I think Keith mentions there their defensive kind of concerns at the moment because, as he mentioned, Fabian Schär is their only real option at the moment because Sven Botman, of course, has an ACL injury. He's not expected to return until the end of the calendar year. Then you look at other players that Eddie Howe's been playing in that position. It's the likes of Emil Kraft and Dan Burn, who are both fullbacks by trade as well. And actually, look at his age. I mean, he's the same age as Sven Botman. So I think planning for the future, you know, that would probably be the partnership Newcastle would look to build their team around. I think just finally on Guehi, what 12 months has been for him. You know, he started last season pretty well, but at the end of last season, he missed 12 Premier League games with a knee injury. And then we saw, as Keith mentioned, you know, he's one of England's best players. If anything, he's very unlucky not to make team of the tournament. So if Newcastle are able to get a compromise with Crystal Palace, it would undoubtedly be one of the signings of the window, and it would absolutely strengthen Newcastle's chances this season.
Yeah, interesting what he was saying there, Eddie Howe, to Keith, saying there's only a very small pool of players that can improve Newcastle. And you know, Guehi obviously was very impressive in the Euros, but you know, you wouldn't say that before that he'd made like a massive mark for himself. So, I mean, what's your gut feeling? Because they've also got Botman to come back, right? So is he going to be starting alongside Botman in an ideal world if they're both fit?
I think he'd be an excellent signing. I think he is so calm. You know, the mentality is so important at this level. When you're talking about that elite level and where Newcastle want to go to, he showed at the Euros, you know, he can perform at that highest level. So I think somebody you could build a defensive line around in years to come. Yes, it's a lot of money, but that's fine. I think that's the kind of money you have to pay if you want to make those big signings. And as Newcastle found last season, you do need that depth because they had so many injury problems. The game is changing. You know, nobody is really backing down when it comes to this international calendar. You know, FIFPro have said that they want concessions, but it isn't happening. You know, UEFA aren't backing down, FIFA aren't backing down. So you're going to need numbers and you're going to need quality. And he would provide both of those. So I think it's smart. I think that's what Newcastle need to do.
How about for Palace, Flex? If he goes, Elise's already gone, Eze is still there, Joachim Andersen, Fulham are interested in him. So, you could potentially lose 3 of your 4 key players. Is that a bit of a concern?
Yeah, I think initially, straight off the bat, that is certainly a concern. When you look at how integral the players you just mentioned are, and including Eze as well, who at the minute is still. But if you are a Palace fan, you would really be concerned. But at the same time, it depends whether you're a pessimist or an optimist, because the fees that are being brought in for these players are truly transformational for a club like Palace. To get, the best part of £50 million for Elise, the best part of £60 million, it looks like, for Mark Guehi. That's a lot of money to reinvest into the squad. And if they do manage to keep hold of Eberiche Eze as well, and okay, Anderson is a significant outgoing as well, they've got resources there if they can get this deal done as quickly and as smoothly as possible to go into it. And they had a taste last season of what it's like without these players. Mark Guehi had some injuries last season. Elise has quite a few injuries as well, and Eze. So it's not like they're foreign to this idea that those players aren't going to be there. And I think Crystal Palace fans as well, I think they know that these players will reach a ceiling respectfully at the right time, and will wish these players well, as long as they get, like the chairman always says, as long as they get what's right for these players. You saw Elise sign a new deal last year when it looked like he was going to go to Chelsea. No, he stayed to sign a new deal, got another year out of him, and now look. And I think with Mark Guehi, it's a natural progression. So I think, yes, on one hand, it is a bit concerning, but at the same time, there's room for optimism because they're getting the right fees for these players.
Well, if they do sell Guehi, do you think that means then that they need to keep hold of Anderson? Because if you sell your 2 senior centre-backs, that's quite a big change to a side, isn't it, going into a new season?
You would think so, and I can't imagine it's what Oliver Glasner would have signed up for. I think he accepts, and that is the model for clubs that aren't in the top 6. Ultimately, you're buying players at a low price at the start of their career, players with potential, knowing that with most of these clubs outside the top 6, that you will sell them on for a big profit, and that's what Brighton have done so brilliantly over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, and that looks like what Crystal Palace are doing here, because they signed Mark Guehi from Chelsea, had a brilliant season before that at Swansea. Let's bear in mind, they reached the playoff final. They came so close to reaching the Premier League under Steve Cooper, a really young side with the likes of Conor Gallagher spent some time on loan there as well. And it just feels like the right time for Mark Guehi as well, considering what he's done over the course of the last few years, especially at Crystal Palace. And we saw that with England too. I think it would be sad because Oliver Glasner's come in, huge amount of excitement. Let's bear in mind how they finished last season. They won 6 the last 7 matches, kept a clean sheet at Anfield, beat Manchester United 4-0 at home as well. So it felt like there was a real momentum going into this coming season. Though, if you end up losing some of these key players, then for Glasner, who there was interest from Bayern Munich in the summer, he must be thinking, this is not what I signed up for at all. But knowing full well, when there are players like that and you can get that sort of money for them, as a club of the size of Crystal Palace, eventually they might go on and try and become a side challenge towards the top of the Premier League. But at this moment in time, that's simply what a club like that has to do to survive.
I think Glasner's a realist, though, and a pragmatist as well. If you go back to when he was at Wolfsburg, so before he was at Frankfurt, he actually got Maxence Lacroix and John Brooks together, who individually were decent defenders, but he made a really good pair and he developed them. And that was the bedrock of them qualifying for the Champions League against the odds that season. Lacroix is a player that I think it wouldn't surprise me if Glasner, taps Palace on the shoulder and says, there's a guy that we can bring in, because he does make mistakes. He has been sent off a few times, but he's quick, he's physical. I've always thought there's real talent there, and if Glasner could work with him again, I think there's a deal to be done there potentially. I think he's somebody who's developed centre-backs really well in his coaching career already.
Yeah. All right, that's very interesting news, isn't it? If you're just joining us, a reminder of the breaking news. Newcastle have made a 3rd bid for Mark Guehi, and that is being considered by Crystal Palace right now. More on that to come. welcome back. If you're just joining us, Newcastle have made a third bid for Mark Guehi, and that is being considered right now by Crystal Palace. We'll let you know if there are any developments on that. Right now, though, we're going to focus on 5 teams that need to make a signing before the window closes. We've got 18 days. These are the clubs. I bet you can't guess who's chosen which one. James, you go first.
I've gone for Tottenham. They'll be really pleased. They got Dominic Solanke in on Saturday, announcing him. He should be in line to start for the first time against Leicester next Monday in their Premier League opener. But it looks like Emerson Royale is going to depart now, and he's going to leave the club. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg has departed as well. So I think they need just a little bit more depth in that wing-back area. They've got Pedro Porro, who's going to be sensational, I'm predicting once again this season, and Udogie at left-back. But I think they're lacking those attacking options in the wing-back area if there's an injury there. And they've got to internally discuss whether they've got enough in central midfield. Oliver Skipp is there as an option to step in and pick up the minutes from Højbjerg, but it's whether or not they think Sarr, Basuma and Bentancur is going to be the midfield that helps propel them to do better than what they did last season and reach the Champions League. But I think in terms of their attacking options, I think they really are putting together a really exciting forward line.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Dan, who are you going for?
I've stuck to my Midlands route and I've gone with Leicester. And of course, Steve Cooper taking over in the summer. And I think for me, the main kind of concern for Steve Cooper just a week to go until the season begins is at the moment they don't have a striker. You know, they have injuries to Patson Daka, Jamie Vardy. They lost Kelechi Iheanacho in the summer as well after his contract expired. So we heard this morning that they're linked to a few different strikers, one in Greece as well. So I think that will be an area he'll want to address. I also think losing Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall to Chelsea, they're just lacking a bit of creativity as well. I know they signed Buonanotte from Brighton on loan, but I think having someone a bit more experienced, someone who maybe even has Premier League experience, although that is a difficult market to shop in, Leicester needs signings before the season begins, and I'm sure Steve Cooper is desperate for them as well.
Do you think they need Premier League experience in those signings as well? Is that what they should be looking at?
I think a little bit. I mean, they do have a bit. They did sign Bobby De Cordova-Reid, whose contract expired after being at Fulham in the summer. He's a very versatile forward who can play in any of those front 3 positions. You look at the back, Connor Cody is a leader. He brings his Premier League experience as well. I think it's just bodies at the moment. I mean, losing someone like Dewsbury-Hall, his creativity, what he did last season, and also that striker. I think if Leicester are to really progress this season and stay up, which I think at the moment, you look at their squad, it still needs to be strengthened. I think you look at the likes of Ipswich and Southampton, who have brought in a variety of players in different positions. I think Steve Cooper will be still looking to add before deadline day.
Kev, you're the only one who's gone outside the Premier League.
Of course.
Why?
Of course. European.
I wonder why. Yeah.
European, so I had to go for Juventus. And if you look at what Juventus have already done, they've already brought in Douglas Luiz. That was a pretty big deal. Still got work to do in that midfield area. They want to get Tern Koopmeiners from Atalanta. Brilliant technical midfielder. But they haven't got that over the line yet. But I think it's at centre-back where they've got a problem because they're a bit thin there. Riccardo Calafiori, it looked as though he was going to come with Thiago Motta from Bologna. That didn't happen. He went to Arsenal instead. They were very strongly linked with Jean-Claire Todibo. Didn't get that over the line either. He's gone to West Ham. So they need to bring in a centre-back. It looks as though they're going to go for Pierre Kalulu, Milan, who won the title with Milan. Looks as though they might be able to do a loan deal with a view to a permanent switch. But that's a squad that still needs surgery if they're going to get back to where they want to be, challenging for the Scudetto.
OK. 2 clubs left. Which of those 2 are you going for?
I've gone for Liverpool. Of course, haven't made a signing yet this summer. And I can understand why some fans may become a little bit agitated by that. But actually, if you look at the setup at Liverpool and you look at who's in control of transfers, you look at Michael Edwards and you look at Richard Hughes, their strike rate is absolutely fantastic. You're talking about bringing some of the Premier League's best ever players in Mohamed Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Alisson to the Premier League. So I can understand why they maybe haven't signed anybody yet, but I think Arne Slot is in the market for a number 6. We're looking at Zubimendi coming in and they're trying to get that deal done, it seems, according to reports. And they haven't really nailed that position down. Of course, Thiago came in, loads of injuries there. They haven't had anyone since Fabinho. Henderson's vacated that area. They had the young lad Stefan Bajcetic last year, was injured, but Alexis McAllister spent a lot of time in that position. He's extremely versatile, but probably wasted in that area of the pitch. So I can see why Liverpool definitely want to do that. And, of course, they've got 3 players there in Trent Alexander, Virgil van Dijk. and Mohamed Salah with only a year left in their contract. So a lot going on. So I can understand why Liverpool haven't just gone in and rushed. That's not a Liverpool style. And I understand why fans would probably be quite calm, but they haven't signed anybody yet, so they definitely need somebody.
Right, well, my one, as you can guess, is a bit of a joke. Chelsea, because they've spent shed loads again, haven't they? But, you look at their lineup and you think, well, maybe they still need a striker. Even with Omarodion there, if he had gone, you've got Nicholas Jackson. I just feel like they're still a little bit imbalanced, which is... am I wrong?
No, well, the squad, it's very difficult to see. Some clubs you look at and you say, right, I can understand what they're trying to do. Chelsea, it still seems quite opportunistic. It still seems... Joao Felix, we talked about at the top of the hour. Good player, but that's to kind of make other deals go through. There isn't a through line there. They've kind of... When you think of when Clear Lake first arrived, it was about more experienced players bringing in bigger names. Then they've pivoted to young players. I've had a lot of churn in the coaching area as well. I still think there's work to do there to really set out a vision of what they're trying to do going forward.
Just before we go, guys, mentioned it before, a little bit of news with Ipswich being interested in Calvin Phillips. Do we think that's going to be a move that could be good for both Ipswich and for Calvin Phillips?
I think when you look on the base of it and look at who Ipswich have signed this summer, they've, I think, done really good business. They've looked at who's really progressed in the Championship the last season, like Connor Townsend, Jacob Greaves from Hull City. Calvin Phillips, we saw him on loan at West Ham last season. It feels like he needs a fresh start. Someone like Kieran McKenna, we know how good of a coach he is. Back-to-back promotions at Ipswich. I think if you trust any coach that could get the best out of Calvin Phillips, perhaps a new start for him, I think you would trust Kieran McKenna.
I think so. Only 2 starts for Man City in the Premier League, 3 starts at West Ham in that loan spell, which went terribly wrong. Got sent off one of his first games, gave away goals against Bournemouth and against Manchester United. But hopefully things work out for Calvin Phillips. He could make a real impact.
Guys, it's been fun, and thank you for bringing some sanity and some order.
I'll do my best.
These guys arguing, flip-flopping the whole time about who's going to be their signing of the season and who's going to be their team that needs to buy someone. But, you just brought some real calm to proceedings.
That's what Super Kev does.
That's what he does, exactly. And some real knowledge as well. Good to have you on board. Thanks very much, guys, of course. Right, coming up, we will be live to the North East for more on the breaking news. Newcastle making a 3rd bid for Mark Guehi.